For about a year and a half now, I have been getting requests to cover 40K in depth concerning biological changes to the human form. Let me just ask y'all one thing. Why would you do this? I've spent like 6 hours reading and I am just now making it past the shortened lore version and history to about the 20K time frame. Based on this, I want to kind of make a disclaimer. Sweet Mary Mother of crap, is this universe not completely and utterly ridiculously expansive? I mean, good lord, I could write a dissertation part 1 and 2 discussing just the genetic physical changes of the abnormals alone. So based on this expansiveness, these videos would either have to gloss over a lot or be broken up into parts. I'm choosing the latter over the former because actually the lore is incredibly interesting and everything should be discussed to its fullest extent, at least in my personal opinion. So because of this, today we will be talking about the gene seed, what it is, and what are some of the actual implants. Later we will discuss actual implants and how they affect biology. So to quote Samuel L. Jackson,
"Hold on to your butts."
because something even as simple as Space Marines will quite literally take like 19 videos. Discussing other topics will obviously result in more videos down the line. This won't become like a pure 40K channel or anything like that, but there's just a ridiculous amount of content to go over, so in the coming years, there will be a lot to talk about. Anyhow, let's discuss why we are actually here. The gene seed from the Warhammer 40K universe, and what it actually does, and what changes to the human's physical form it causes. So it all begins when a human female and a human male love each other very much, and would like to create a 7.5 foot tall monster with multiple extra organs capable of ripping apart orks like they were made out of tissue paper. The gene seed is essentially a collection of organs in a viral machine cobbled together under the name to kind of sort of explain what they are. Originally, during the 30th millennium, the gene seed was created and designed by the man who would later become the emperor of mankind and the scientists of the biotechnical division. This genetic research compound was located under the Himalayan mountains, where experiments would be conducted on the human genetic structure in an effort to create more effective warriors and, in general, cure humanity of its shortcomings. Seems that most geneticists start out like this, and then as time continues, much like genetic drift, so do their goals. Eventually, through trial and error, which is an inference on my part because just like with the nature of gene alterations, nothing is assured, successes were had through the understanding and knowledge that would yield the ability to form organs within a human male that would aid them in the battlefield. On top of this, their physical stature and power would be changed to make them stronger, faster, and more resilient than the most fit humans currently alive, or were that really alive in any time period. So essentially, think of it this way, which interestingly relates to the real world that we live in, just kind of the earliest iteration of it. Viruses were used to implant DNA into cellular clusters to form them into kind of what was wanted. Along with this, germ cells were used to help facilitate the growth of specialized organs through interaction with metabolism and the viruses, which would make them grow properly. We have half of this process actually done now. For anyone who watches this channel regularly, it is known as CRISPR and Cas9. A virus can be loaded up with genes, and utilizing CRISPR in the body, genetic coding can be repaired or altered depending on the desired effect, which has the potential to not only cure us of genetic disease, but also stop other ailments like cancer, parasites, and other viruses, as well as bacteria, from ransacking our meat suits. But if you'd like an entire breakdown on what CRISPR does, head over to my second channel, Croatoan Medical, and I have a video there waiting for you. But just know that for the time being that this form of genetic alteration closely resembles what we already have, which I thought was actually pretty interesting. The germ cells are there after the injection to provide the necessary biomass to grow whatever organ you would really need to be attempting to grow. So for instance, if you wanted to grow a kidney, you wouldn't take like neural tissue and alter it to a kidney, as that would be a waste of time and resources. Instead, these germ cells interacting with the virus possessing the necessary instructions in DNA will form the germ cells into what it needs to be through division and replication until eventually the desired organ has been formed. Using the body's own physiological processes, these organs can be formed over time, integrating them into the body using the body's own resources. This makes sure that there is really no immunological response to the formation of this organ. This is just really kind of one way in which the gene seed is applied to the human form. Another way is actual implantation of a specific organ. The organ can be grown outside of the human body and then implanted and connected to specific systems that need to be bolstered, which we will kind of discuss in a moment. In this way, more than likely, human stem cells from that human would be used to grow grow these organs, as this would also not really spark any immunological response by the body, and immune system suppressing medicines would not be necessary. This is not to say, however, that the gene seed is all external physical effects such as extra organs. Many of these implants do interact with specifically the brain to alter what is perceived as normal and change how the brain functions. Because of these neural implants, the patient must be alive and functioning, which means they can't be put under, and pain is usually not dulled by the use of painkillers, making this process extremely horrifying if you're the one who's getting these implants. The effect of the gene seed implantations and pure alteration via viruses to the brain would have more metabolic effects on the body, yielding the results that were desired, whereas the physical changes to the body further along in the alteration process brought on by organ implants to the body are changes that would be kind of more battle-bearing effects. Now this all sounds pretty great, doesn't it? Why aren't all humans given this genetic alteration to their bodies to make even something like a guardsman an unstoppable battle machine? Well, there's actually a few reasons, the first being that over the course of 10,000 years, genetic drift of these implants has caused mutations to arise within most forms, much like we see, the random mutations that happen in DNA. Secondly, very few chapters actually possess pure forms, or really the purest forms, because there is no pure form anymore. Because of this, should you administer this to everyone, that would stretch the amount way too thin, and would also potentially yield more monsters in the process through these mutations that have happened. Humanity at this point is massively large, the empire stretches extremely far and wide, and many humans have been born and are still surviving at this point in time. The gene seed is something to be closely monitored to make sure maladaptive traits do not begin to crop up. Usually, this is monitored by tech priests. The sheer scope and magnitude of keeping all humans under a watchful eye would be ludicrous. And not to mention, all humans don't really have great intentions, so you really want to make them like an unstoppable machine. So as such, only specific humans are given the gene therapy to become the hulking behemoths they are. But for a human who actually does undergo this process and is accepted into these chapters, such as the Grey Knights, the Ultramarines, or the Dark Angels, what exactly can they expect in terms of changes? And there will actually, just so you guys know, be a breakdown of all three in the coming months to discuss the differences in terms of strengths and weaknesses. But for now, biologically, what is the general alteration that is done to their bodies to ready them for the fights between them and the enemies that they face on a near constant basis? Let's get to that. There are roughly 19 phases in total, which comes out to 19 implants in total, but there are an extra 3, but those aren't regularly given out. The implants are really only for young boys between the ages of 10 to 14, and that's when you need to start, but each one has varying times that they are started, with the final implant given around the ages of 16 to 18 years old, and usually no later than that. The first through third phase of implants given are a secondary heart, osmodula, and biscopia. What are these specifically responsible for? Let's run down a short description to understand their necessity, but there will be a more extensive video discussing the impacts of these changes in future videos. Again, the lore is quite expansive concerning these alterations. The secondary heart, which is referred to as the maintainer, is the first and surprisingly least difficult to implant into the human body. This implant is essentially a smaller version of the original heart and is implanted into the circulatory system near the original heart as well. With the second heart pumping, this has a cascade of effects on the body, leading to a much better warrior. First, the extra force in which the blood is pumped takes strain off the original heart. In turn, this also allows more blood and subsequently oxygen to flow through the body. With this implant completed, should the original heart suffer life-ending damage, the second heart can take over the duties and keep the blood pumping until the soldier can get to a medical facility to have it repaired. Next, the osmodula, also referred to as iron heart, is the second implant a human will receive, and it is imperative this is completed during the portion of life before puberty, when the body is about to undergo a rapid growth rate. This is a neural organ implanted near the pituitary gland, which will become a permanent part of the soldier's endocrine system. Here, it will facilitate the release of something we should all be familiar with at this point, human growth hormone. Since a human has not been altered too much before this point, when the hormone begins to ramp up, their body is more apt to adapt to these changes because it still needs to grow. When the hormone is released, the future soldier is also given a diet with microscopic ceramic-based materials. They will act to help the bone and musculoskeletal system grow. With these hormones flooding the body and the scaffolding in place to help it grow, a 10-year-old will be tremendous in stature compared to any other standard homegrown human their age, and more than likely larger than any regular human regardless of age. Once this implant has taken hold, the body will complete its growing ceiling at roughly 7 to 7.5 feet, or roughly 2.1 to 2.3 meters tall. This is taller than Master Chief in full Mjolnir armor for reference. The muscle mass contained within the soldier will also be well outside the normal ranges of what our bodies can currently hold due to resource limitations and genetic cutoffs. But with everything in place for an ultramarine, they are able to continue well past past what is normal. Another thing to note about bone growth changes, however, is in reality there are costs and there are benefits. One of the perceived benefits of this implant is that the ribs fuse into a hard shell, making them virtually impenetrable to projectiles. The perceived cost is that during surgery, this makes it quite difficult to get through to fix organ damage. But in reality, the real cost is that our ribs are flexible because this actually helps us breathe. Without it, our lungs cannot properly expand, and as such, our breathing ability is greatly reduced. This disease is known as spondylocostal dysplasia and can be life-threatening. Usually your ribs have to be broken to get them to unfuse, and the recovery time is massive. So I suppose there must be a workaround for ultramarines should this be the case. So the third implant is called biscopia, which is colloquially known as the Forge of Strength. This organ is implanted into the chest and works in conjunction with the osmodula. While the osmodula has more of an effect on bones and a secondary effect on muscle, biscopia is all about that muscle, baby. This is a spherical organ that controls hormones more than anything else, and in doing so, will bring a Space Marine's physical combat and survivability up to superhuman levels. The presence of this hormone, which is more than likely based upon the muscle-building hormone known as IGF-1, will stimulate muscle growth on a wide level, resulting in a Marine's physical strength being strong enough to deal devastating blows in hand-to-hand combat, as well as carry what would be virtually impossible for even an Olympic bodybuilder to hold. This has allowed them to come out on top where infantrymen have fallen in droves simply due to their ridiculous strength. With your body growing at this ridiculous rate and muscles sucking up more and more blood and oxygen as well as nutrients to function, the hearts would be strained to provide any of this with the standard carrying capacity of blood currently. This would invariably lead to things like syncope, exhaustion, and slow recovery times after fighting, if not for the fourth implant. This implant is known as hemastmin, or the blood maker. This is the answer to supplying the body with the necessary fuel to keep it going. Typically implanted in the aorta of a person, this implant will alter the chemical composition of a Marine's blood to carry more oxygen and nutrients more efficiently. But as time continues on, battles rage, energy is spent, bones are broken, and muscle is torn, there would need to be an answer for this. Currently, our bodies, by comparison, would have an extremely slow healing time to that of a Space Marine's. I mean, in reality, our bodies do their best to heal. In a lot of ways, humans can bounce back from things that would end other animals. But this is deemed too slow. Imagine it this way. You're driving a Honda Civic, which is your body, and the engine is your healing factor. A Honda Civic engine has no problem powering a Civic, but now drop that same engine into a semi hauling a full trailer, and it's not going to be enough. The same premise is to why this next implant exists, known as Lerman's organ. Its explicit purpose is to heal the body by producing scar tissue and stopping blood loss. The organ is the same shape as the liver, but is smaller and implanted into the chest cavity. Its purpose is to release a biosynthetic cell that acts similar to platelets in the body, which, if you didn't know, platelets are what kind of group up and will stop you from bleeding. But these biosynthetic cells will attach themselves to leukocytes and quickly move to the area of damage. It can be assumed that they respond to the same chemical messengers that tell blood clots to form, but where natural blood clots fail due to size of a wound, these synthetic cells will thrive. They will quickly cover a gushing wound and fuse it into scar tissue, sealing it entirely, keeping the blood where it needs to be. Should a bone break, such as the femur or pelvis, which can actually lead to a bleed out, it will do the same, severely limiting the loss of blood. Due to this, Space Marines are seen as nearly invincible, as they do not succumb to wounds that would lead to a bleed out for any human really in about 30 seconds. And the final implant we will get to today is necessary for prolonged conflicts that plague humanity in the 40K universe. This particular implant is known as the catalepsian node, which is implanted in the back of the cerebrum near the brainstem. As humans have evolved on Earth and are accustomed to day and night cycles, our hormones have centered around this single ideology: when it's night, get to sleep. Now currently it's not fully understood why we sleep, but we know that the effects of not receiving sleep are hallucinations, concentration issues, comas, and eventually mental deterioration leading to getting bodied. Without sleep, our brains suffer. It's just as simple as that. This node is somewhat of an answer, but only a temporary fix to the necessity of sleep. A Space Marine can shut off portions of their brain while still remaining active and alert. When fatigue hormones begin to rise, the brain starts screaming for sleep, but they can subsequently shut down and put a part of their brain into sleep. However, this would have different effects on them depending on which part they shut down. Say you need to shut down your temporal lobes, right? This can lead to difficulty speaking, hearing, and discerning what's real around you despite what you see. The occipital lobe would not be recommended to shut down, seeing as this has been associated with vision, and would completely and severely hamper, as well as probably give you hallucinations, which would be prevalent in your field of view. However strange this may sound, the idea is actually based upon animals in the world who do this, specifically the bottlenose dolphin. Dolphins are able to shut down some of their brain function while remaining alert in the ocean for predators that may be trying to sneak up on them. This would be an invaluable asset for soldiers to possess, and is shown as such when a group of Space Marines were up for 328 hours straight, or roughly 13.6 days in battle against the orks on Rin's world. 2 weeks is all it takes to completely body a normal Homo sapiens, and even well before that, we would be completely useless in battle. This suggests that using this method and the success shown by the Space Marines, they could, in theory, go longer without succumbing to their biological constants. However, it would not be recommended. So good lord, we only got to like 6 implants, but don't worry, the rest are coming in part 2. It's becoming apparent that I'm really gonna need to make longer videos for 40K, as there is so much information to be covered. Anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed, and if I missed anything, let me know. The lore is quite extensive, and even with diving into it, I need to paraphrase some points. Regardless, I will drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and second channel in the description, so go check out that CRISPR video if gene alteration interests you. I also want to thank some of my patrons. I would like to thank our astronaut, It's Not a Spoon, and I also want to thank our scientists, Freedom Units 44, Skilt, and Trey Windenall. Thank you guys. And to the rest of my patrons, obviously, thank you as well. Your patronage goes a long way to helping out during the usually crap month of January. Okay, so that does it for me. Expect more 40K Warhammer content out soon-ish, and I will see y'all in the next one.